Hi guys, Arthur here from Homeowner DIY. In this video, I'm going to be replacing a steel drop-in sink with a porcelain drop-in sink as well as a faucet. The material here, the sink and the faucet, are customer supplied, so I didn't have a chance to look at this before I got started. This install is not going to be quite as smooth as I would like it to be because I didn't have a chance to prepare, but I'm going to do the same thing for another bathroom in this house, and that one will go a lot more smoothly. Guys, check out the description for a link to the other video. Otherwise, what we'll do now is look at our setup. This is our setup. So this is a steel drop-in sink and a single handle faucet. I'm going to remove this sink, install a porcelain drop-in sink with a new single handle faucet. So with that in mind, what we'll do now is material and tools. This is the materials list for this job. So the sink is a Kohler Bryant, is a porcelain oval sink that is similar to the previous size. So the faucet is a Moen Findlay. You see the model number at the bottom. Next we have white silicone. This isn't a squeeze tube. You can also get it in a tube for a silicone gun. And then we have white DAP. Once again, this is a squeeze tube. You can also get it for a silicone gun. And to finish off, Plumbers putty and then white Teflon tape. Guys, this is the materials list for this job. So what we'll do now is a tools list. Or this is the tools list for this job. So I have my pouch. I'll need a flathead screwdriver, maybe a hammer. Sometimes drop-in sinks are silicone in. We'll see what happens here. A pan for any water for testing. My finishing kit. So channel lock, pliers, 10-inch crescent wrench, silicone tooling tool, ratchet wrenches. We'll see if there's anything else. A work light and then an extension cord. Guys, this is the tools list for this job. So let's swap out and install this new drop-in sink and faucet. So I'm going to start by loosening the slip adapter nut, and then the clips that hold the sink down can be loosened off. So I'm going to remove the entire sink as a whole unit with the drain and the faucet. Alright, this sink has 4 brackets that suck the sink down to the countertop. So there are 4 slot screws that hold the brackets. These brackets need to be removed. Now, this is also the time before you even get started to make sure that your countertop is in good shape. As you can see here, the countertop looks brand new, so there's no issue with swapping out a sink. But this is the first thing that you're going to do when considering changing out your sink. Check the condition of your countertop. Now the imprint where the old gasket was needs to be cleaned. You need to get the debris off so you have a nice clean surface when you dap and silicone your sink into place. So because the single handle faucet is being used and there's a 3-hole design, the base plate needs to be used to cover the other holes. So with the foam gasket, there's an adhesive side, there's a white cover that you need to pull off, and then the adhesive side will go to the deck plate side. Be sure to firmly push the gasket in place. So here there's an O-ring that fits in this groove. You're going to use the O-ring if you're not going to use the deck plate, but because the deck plate is being used, there's a ring on the deck plate that will go where the O-ring is going to be. So if you don't use the deck plate, use the O-ring. If you use the deck plate, don't use the O-ring. So the washer has a rubber side and then it has a steel side. So the steel side is going to go on the nut side, and then the rubber side is going to go towards the sink. Here you can see that the O-ring has been removed. If you don't remove the O-ring and you use it, the faucet is not going to sit properly on the deck plate. So here is the nut and the washer that is already installed. The nut is not threaded all the way through. So here is the wrench that comes with the Moen faucet. The smaller end is what you're going to use. The holes that you see at the end is where you can put a screwdriver for extra leverage, but tighten it down as much as you can, and if you want a little bit of extra leverage, you can use a screwdriver. Now the nut is not threaded all the way through. The idea is that you can flip the nut over depending on the thickness of your countertop and your sink. So in this case here, I put the thread portion away from the sink so there was less threading involved. There is a notch in the nut to show which side the threads are on. Once everything is tightened, make sure that you see the foam gasket in the hole all the way around. If you're off, you may have a leak. My approach to this is to silicone between the sink and the countertop and then do a ring of DAP on the outside. The reason is the silicone will act as an adhesive and also a waterproof barrier, so if anything gets underneath the sink, it's not going to start to rot out the countertop. Now in this case, because this sink is virtually the same size as the previous drop-in, there wasn't enough material for the silicone to adhere to. So in this case here, me siliconing the sink did not work out. To line the sink with the drain, I would line up the hole in the sink with the FOP portion of the trap arm coming up. Just eye this out and then drop the drain in through the hole. Here you can see the faint outline of the previous gasket, which means this sink is a little bit smaller than the previous. That's why there's silicone squeezing out. I thought the sink would be bigger than what we have here, and this is actually going to be problematic later on. This is the drain assembly that comes with the Moen faucet, so it's a one piece. It's a pop-up style. It has a nut that will tighten the drain assembly down to the sink itself. So there is a coned washer that goes on the bottom, and then there's a rubber washer that would go on the inside. Now, because the Kohler and the Moen are not the same brand, they don't quite fit together. So in this case here, I will have to use putty. So take some putty, roll it into a line like it's dough, and then it can be pushed onto the underside of the drain. Now, there is a such thing as too much. If you put in too much, you'll have a big space and then it'll wash away with time. So you want it to sit tight, the drain to the sink, and you want to see the putty squeeze all the way around. Now the drain can be put into the hole of the sink. So the coned washer, the bevel side is going to go towards the top, and then the nut that tightens down the drain assembly can be put on. Now, because this is plastic, you need to use Teflon tape to seal the threads. Don't use compound pipe dope because it can react with the plastic and eat away at it. I'm using white Teflon tape, so I'm going to wrap it about 4 times. If you're using pink tape or something a little bit thicker, I would say wrap it 2 times. You're only trying to prevent any water from dripping down the threads. Now the slip adapter nut can be put onto the drain. So there is a coned washer just like the one for the drain assembly. The bevel part is going to go down towards the slip adapter body. So it's the opposite direction of the one on the drain assembly. Because it's a union trap, the trap portion can be swung back and forth to make it line up if you're a little bit off. Otherwise, tighten up the nut for the drain assembly. I would start by doing it by hand because it's only plastic. If you have a leak on test, then you can use channel lock pliers. So because I'm not confident the way the drain assembly is sitting, I'm going to use channel lock pliers to tighten the drain down. Try to be careful so you don't scratch or damage the nut too much, because of course we want this to look nice. Now the slip adapter nut can be tightened. So you see how there's play between the nut and the drain assembly? I don't know why this is an issue with Moen, but because of this play, I've had leaks in the past. So either use silicone or putty to seal between the drain assembly and the top of the nut. Again, just tighten the nut hand tight. Now the water lines need to be attached to the stops. So in general, there will be a tag on one of the lines, and it will be normally on the hot side. So here it says hot side. There's also a model number for the faucet. So as usual, hot is on the left. So for these types of lines, what I would suggest is spin the actual supply line the opposite way that you're going to be tightening. And that way, as you tighten up the supply line will want to straighten itself out. If you don't counter turn the supply line a little bit, you can create a kink and either have low flow or a loud faucet. Make sure to back wrench the stop with a 10-inch crescent wrench, and then the nut for the supply line is typically 5/8. Here you can see I'm using channel locks to counter turn the supply line to offset the spin of the nut. When tightening down the nut, tighten it down until it stops. I've never broken one of these things, but you want to tighten it as much as you can. And now repeat the process for the opposite side. It doesn't matter which side you start on, hot or cold. It's all the same in the end. The excess putty that has squeezed out can now be removed, and I'm going to reuse this on the slip adapter trap nut. Now a bead of DAP can be applied on the outside between the sink and the countertop to give it a nice finished look. When doing the bead, you want just enough to fill the space and no more. You're going to wipe away the excess, but if you put too much, you're going to make a mess, and it's going to be very hard to clean off and make look nice. This part here is technical. It's something that's going to take a little bit of practice. You'll have to figure out how much DAP you need for the variation in the spaces, because the sink is not going to be perfectly straight. This is a DAP / silicone tooling tool. It has two different sizes on either end, so that is going to be for the amount of space that you need to tool your material into. My method for this is to go one direction and then go back the other direction after. Every something like 6 inches, wipe away the excess and then go ahead and do it again. You can always wipe off a little bit more if you need to. So how to make this look nice. The amount that you put into the space, the amount of pressure that you put as you're wiping, these are all going to be factors. This is why I say that this is technical. Less is more. If you have an area that is not thick enough, you can always wait for the DAP to dry and then go back and add a little bit more. But patience is going to be key to make this look good. So I didn't show this, but make sure that you test the sink. Put 1 or 2 full loads of water down the drain and then check the top nut, the slip adapter nut, and everything else for leaks, including your supply lines. So the faucet comes with a faucet wrench and then an aerator key. My suggestion is to tape this on the inside of the cabinet in case you have to service the faucet later on. That's the aerator key, and then this is the faucet wrench. But everything is now done. Everything looks good. There's nothing leaking. Also, come back and check later on after a half hour or an hour in case you have a weeping leak that you don't notice right off the bat. But with that in mind, what we'll do now is an overview of this job. Alright guys, so that concludes this job. So when it comes to these Moen drain assemblies, I don't know why the diameter of the tailpiece for the drain assembly is not quite the same as an 1¼ inch slip adapter nut. This isn't the first time I've run into this issue, but be prepared to either need silicone or putty to put on top of the nut so you don't have a leak. Otherwise, the only other thing that I would have liked to have gone better on this job was the new sink is not as big as the old one. It did work out, but not by much. One thing I would suggest is it might be better to put the drain in, have everything ready to go, even test before do the final dapping so nothing moves around. That was one issue with the silicone because I didn't know this on this job, but the silicone was a little bit of a mess, even trying to scrape it off. That's why I didn't get quite a clean line like I wanted to, but in the end everything worked out. The time on this job. The time was about an hour and a half. At least that's what I think the typical person will need to do a job like this. Otherwise, it's basically a remove and replace. Make sure that your countertop is in good shape. Otherwise, you're going to have to replace your countertop before you can do a new drop-in sink. The cost of this job. So I took a look at the sink and the faucet, along with the DAP and the putty. I'm going to say the cost in total was about $450. The sink is a Kohler, so it's not a crappy brand per se, even though it's only a porcelain sink. And then the faucet is around $150 to $200 depending on where you get it from. And then the putty and other small odds and ends like DAP is negligible in price. Guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you learned something. I hope something here is going to help you on your project when you need to go ahead and do that. Guys, nothing. Please hit the like button, subscribe, and I'll see you on the next project.